Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. In today's episode, we're exploring the topic of confidence and how it affects our lives and relationships. The things we chat about are what core confidence is, the importance of clarity and how it impacts our confidence, and how we can build our own confidence and help our partner to become more confident. Now let's get into it.
Welcome to the Date Forever podcast, everyone. Today we're welcoming Fiona Pearman. Fiona is the co-founder of Pearman & Partners, and she's co-author of Core Confidence. Fiona's interest in supporting gender-balanced workplaces that harness the collective strengths of a diverse workforce was sparked through facilitating workshops for women who were not achieving their career progression they aspired to. Fiona works with organisations to shift the systemic and structural barriers that impede gender equity. Welcome to the show, Fiona.
It's lovely to be here, Sammy and Nathan.
It's great to have you on. So can you just tell us, what is core confidence?
Well, core confidence is a feeling as much as anything. So it's a feeling that you have inside, and it's your ability to go, I've got this, no matter what comes at you externally. It's an inner resource that we all possess, and through various trials and tribulations of life, sometimes we get disconnected from it, or we self-sabotage, so we don't have a really good connection to it. But what we do know is everyone can reconnect to their core confidence, and that's a lot of the work that Kate and I do.
So Kate is your co-author, isn't she?
Yes, Kate Burra is the co-author of Core Confidence and has worked for a long time with women supporting their leadership development and that they achieve their career goals.
So, Fee, you've joined us on a podcast about relationships. Can you give us a little bit of a relationship status of your own?
Long time married actually now, although I do remember back in the days where that was not the case, and the various adventures I might have had finding what ended up being my soulmate. So I've been with Chris for 24 years and we've been married for 23.
Amazing.
What an adventure.
Yeah.
So before we kind of jump right into all the good stuff, I would love to know, you touched on core confidence being a resource, something that we have access to and we need to learn how to, tap into it. What are some of the impacts that you see when people are lacking that, when they can't tap into that or they're struggling to tap into it?
Yeah, it's such an interesting one, confidence, because people will get feedback or they'll get told, you're not showing enough confidence or you lack confidence or we'd like to see you demonstrating more confidence. And yet when you actually ask, what do you mean by that? It ends up being this kind of how long is a piece of string. It's such a continuum. There's so many different definitions. And I think that's really kind of why we spent so much time and got fascinated by, well, what is this resource and how can we really get in good contact with it? And the more research we did, the more it became apparent that, yes, it is something that people are challenged by. Every time we do work in a room or we run a workshop or we're presenting a webinar or speaking at a conference, you can see everybody visibly go, oh, it's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, everyone has this issue with confidence. Everyone, even people who present as really confident in the quiet, the coaching session or just off to the side, they'll say, inside I don't feel confident at all. So it is something we're all familiar with. And I think it's a really interesting one. And Sammy, when we were talking about this, we're talking about, well, mainly I've spent my work thinking about how confidence plays out in careers and then what it means for us advancing our careers. But I think it's a really interesting question around how does it play out in our personal lives. And since we've been talking about that, or you mentioned it, I've been thinking a little bit more about what does that mean? What does it look like? And do we have different levels of confidence in different places?
So I guess if we are lacking confidence, which you mentioned is a pretty common thing, how do we get more of it? What are some of the things that we can do to build up our confidence in different areas?
Well, I think what we found is that a lot of the work around confidence tends to orient us towards going and getting the external aspects of confidence, which are fantastic. They're all useful. They're things like, build your network and relationships, get clear, make decisions, work hard, be a subject matter expert. All of those things are important. When we were actually working with this, initially in workshops, what we found was that there were these internal aspects of confidence, if you like, that were, to me, where the real gold lies. And, these are much more what we've defined as the inner aspects of core confidence. And so when we look at those, they're things like being focused and present. These are far more the being aspects as opposed to, the doing aspects. And, they're about being able to be authentic. They're about being able to ask for help, which is, to a certain degree about vulnerability. And, this piece about being able to face fear, that comes up a lot. The confidence and fear conversation is like something that, it doesn't matter where you start, if it's a confidence issue, there's going to be some aspect of fear sitting there as well. And the other thing we found is to this thing of being really able to maintain resilience, that's really powerful too. So when we look at how do you build or access confidence, for us it's become very much how do I get in good contact with these inner aspects that therefore allow me to show up in my true confident self.
I think it was really interesting what you shared there about the ability to ask for help and having the confidence to do that. I had a girlfriend a little while ago, and she was in a fairly new relationship. They'd been together, approaching a year, and neither of them had yet said that they loved the other one, but they had been having, future focused conversations about moving in together and what their future might look like. But neither of them had kind of put it on the table and said, I love you. I was having this conversation with my girlfriend, and I was like, I couldn't wrap my head around what it was for her that she was lacking the confidence to articulate that and to really say that, because Nathan and I have been together for, 10, 12, 13 years. I think it's 13 years. And I couldn't go back there. I couldn't go back to that time where saying I love you was so foreign or so new. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Like, if we're wanting to communicate things to our partner and we're lacking some confidence, is there anything we can do to sort of get over that or lean into it? Or I don't know what the thing is.
Oh, wow. I think this is so beautiful and so true and so human, right? It's just, the vulnerability of being the first one, of going first, of saying I love you, of having the confidence to hold yourself with that truth when you don't know what the other person will say. That's the scary bit, right? The kicker for you is the reason I think that we shy away from it is because it feels so risky and so scary. And if I say something and you don't meet me there, well, what will that mean for me? What will that mean for us? And a year is a really long time if you're talking about moving in together to not have actually said that. So, I would be really encouraging them to go there, because one way or another, they've got to have that confidence. They've got to know. And if one of them does feel that way and the other one doesn't, better to know now than to keep in this dance of, not revealing that. Or even maybe what would be really brave is to say, hey, we haven't gone there. We haven't said this, but it seems a bit weird that we haven't. Do we want to talk about that? Do we want to talk about the fact that neither of us have said it, or we can't say it, or it's too scary to, or it's risky? Like, I think being able to at least address or acknowledge what must be somewhat an elephant in their room now would be really important.
Well, luckily this girlfriend, they've moved in together. They've both said the L word. It was a beautiful moment for both of them. So yes, they figured it out. But for me on reflection, it was like I just couldn't recall a time where I was lacking confidence to articulate to someone that I was in love with, that I was in love with them. I say it so freely to Nate. Yeah, it was a reminder that, I have confidence to articulate the way that I feel. And I'd kind of forgotten that other people don't necessarily have that, or that that's not something that comes easily to everybody.
Yes, yeah. And I think whether it's saying I love you, or whether it's your commitment into the relationship, or what your intention is about the relationship, sometimes these things do take time. Sometimes we're not even conscious of them. Sometimes we're not even aware how this is playing out. So after my husband and I had been together for about 8 to 10 years, I was doing some mentoring in a group, and it was for business and personal. And there were a bunch of, it was a small mentoring group, and there was a guy there, and he was getting coached around his relationship with his wife. They'd been together, I think, about 30 years actually. And the coach was really holding him to account. And they were really doing this in-depth stuff, and it was going. And as she was doing it, I was going, "Oh my God, that's me! Oh God, oh gosh!" And I was just having this, that wonderful thing in like group work sometimes where it's someone else but it's yours.
Yeah.
And I went, "Oh gosh." So, and I realized, so basically and it wasn't the same situation as him or that thing, but what I realized was that, despite the fact we'd been together with 2 children and we were married for, let's say about 8 years or something, I was not fully 100% in, and I didn't know it. Like, it wasn't a conscious thing. But what happened was, my way of dealing with the world was to always have one foot out, and basically that meant that I would be the one to leave. If anything went wrong, I was going to go first. Like, that was just my safety, my default, my defense mechanism, basically. And I just realized I didn't want to live like that anymore. I wanted to be fully in, even if that meant being super vulnerable, and whatever would happen, or whatever the risk was, I was going to do it. Yeah. And so I did. I came home and I said, "Hey, I've just got to tell you something I didn't know, but today I found out that unconsciously." And so he always laughs and he says, "It took you 8 years to catch up with me." But
how did your relationship change after that?
So the biggest change was me, to your point about I love you. I mean, we've said that a lot to each other always, but I was so freed up to say it 10, 20, 100 times a day, whatever. Like, there was never any level of anything of holding back anything, really. Like, it was just being able to be fully in. So I think there is I'm not sure if it's confidence or not, but there was a whole piece there of really just, stepping fully vulnerably into everything.
Yeah, letting yourself be all in.
Yeah, letting yourself be all in. I think that was the thing that I didn't know that I didn't know it until I was there.
Yeah. I think it's amazing, isn't it? That even after that time that you were like, "Oh, okay, now, you can do the wedding, you can do the kids," and then it's not external, it's internal.
Yeah, it was a complete and it was only because I was doing that mentoring. And to be fair, he didn't know, right? Like, he only knew me as I was and everything that I was. So he wasn't actually waiting for me. That's his joke now, in retrospect. But at the time, he had everything that was available from me was with him, but I didn't know there was more.
Then you found a whole nother level.
Yeah, you didn't realize you were holding back.
Yeah. So that's my funny story about that.
It's so beautiful though,
Yeah,
and who knows, you might still tap into a whole nother level.
Oh gosh, look, I don't think we're necessarily ever done. So who knows what will happen?
So
yeah. My experience of humans is that we're all pretty fragile, really. And to be as kind as we can with each other. But also, if there are important things that need to be said, that we don't shy away from them. And I think that's the confidence piece, that, even though it may not land as well as I wanted, or it may not be the thing the other person really wants to hear, I don't hold back from saying the important things, because I respect this relationship enough, or I love the other person enough, or this matters enough that I'm prepared to speak up about things that are important.
So you mentioned before that confidence is kind of an inner game. So is there something that we can do, like if we can see that our partner's lacking some confidence, can we influence that externally?
Look, I think actually we can, and it's interesting because I work a lot in facilitation and with people who don't necessarily know each other that well. And one of the things that we know about those forums is that what we want to do as quickly as possible is create what's called psychological safety. So this is a safe space where I can express, and talk about things more truthfully, more vulnerably, more openly. And so that's a real art, if you like. There's this notion. I mean, all humans know how to hold space. I've ever been with anyone in a very difficult time, or through a death or grief or loss. We've all held space for other people, but I think when you can see that confidence is a real issue for your partner, being able to hold space for them such that they can, in time, access those inner elements of confidence so that they can show up fully and so that they can participate. That's a really amazing thing to do. And I would actually say that's very true of the relationship with my husband. That early on, I remember I'd been through a couple of those interesting relationships one tends to embark on in one's 20s, which that was certainly me. And look, I don't regret any of it. I'm really grateful for all the experiences. But when we finally got together, I was very independent and really, I don't know that it was a lack of confidence per se, but I was definitely not very trusting. So I was prepared to be with him, but I found that I just didn't necessarily feel that trust came very easily. And he didn't shy away from that. He just waited for me to catch up with that, really. So that was a relatively quick sort of thing, in the early stages of the relationship.
Fiona, can you tell us a little bit about what you did to work on establishing that trust? Because it sounds like it was an inner thing.
Yeah. So I think to Nath's point, one of the things was I wasn't under pressure that I had to do it by a certain date. So it wasn't as though the other person was saying, I expect this of you now and, we're in relationship and therefore you should or whatever. Chris was just respecting where I was and I was just taking my time to feel into a place where I felt secure. Doesn't seem quite the right word, but it probably was something like that, where I felt comfortable and secure enough to really trust that where we were going and what we were doing would be something for the future. It was a little bit disruptive. We went to Perth. We met my parents. There was all sorts of things going on. Chris has actually been married before, so my parents had not expected that their daughter was going to marry someone who'd married before, and they had all these ideas about that. So it was a lot of layering. I think one of the things with relationships is we're not just carrying our own ideas, expectations, but all the people around us tend to have their expectations and layer them in as well. So I'm grateful that I was able to have the time and the space to come to my own place with that. And I think one of the things was that no pressure, and also I was prepared to trust the process. I think we both were, but I didn't say to myself, you have to do something by a certain time. And then, of course, because I let go of worrying about it, within a few weeks it was there.
Yeah.
So
you touched on this idea of creating psychological safety and that circle of safety within, a group of facilitating a workshop or similar. But obviously we want to create that with our partner too, that it's like, I come with no intent to harm or hurt or damage you. Is there a way that we can, maybe fast track's not the right word, but is there a way that we can encourage that kind of nurturing and sense of safety within a relationship?
Yeah. And the fast track to psychological safety is vulnerability. So the only way that we get to that really safe space is when we're prepared to be vulnerable. Someone has to go first. Someone has to be prepared to be vulnerable first. I would say in our relationship, we've taken turns at that, at different times. One of us has been prepared to lean in or to say something or to offer a new path or to do something, and the other's gone, wow, okay, yes, yeah. But someone has been prepared to do that first. And what I do know about vulnerability and confidence is they're very closely related, that it takes a lot of confidence to be prepared to be vulnerable.
Yeah. That kind of ties back to the thing that we were talking about before about saying I love you, that someone has to, I guess, put themselves out there first to be able to actually say it and express what they're feeling, but that may create the psychological safety for the other person then to express what they're feeling too.
Definitely. I think one of the lovely things about getting a bit older is it doesn't feel quite so risky, in the sense that even if it's not reciprocated or it's not met exactly as you want, because you have more, in my case, I had greater inner reserves and inner confidence and inner sense of myself. I wasn't relying on the validation or the expression or the, receiving back from the other person in the same way. And I think that changes the dynamic because there's not the expectation we both have to do this at the same time.
Yeah.
So, Fee, I've heard you talk a little bit about the relationship between having clarity and that impacts your ability to have confidence. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, this is a big one. We've done a lot of research around clarity in the last couple of years, and very curious about why don't we get clear? What is it that stands in the way of people getting clear? And I've got a few theories about this. One is that when I get clear about something, I have to take responsibility for it. So I actually have to, own it and take responsibility. And the other thing about clarity is it means I'm prepared to say no to certain things. And when I say no, I'm actually going to stop having all the options on the table. So clarity means saying yes to certain things and no to other things. And that can induce for some of us, and I will put my hand up here, and certainly in the past, a bit of FOMO, because then I might miss out on things if I get clear. So I think there's some, again, very good reasons why maybe we don't get clear, but the cost to us of not getting clear is that we can't really live our truth. We'll tend to vacillate. We'll tend to not hold ourselves accountable. There's a whole lot of things that happen when we're not prepared to get clear.
So does the clarity come before the confidence, or the confidence comes and then we can get clear?
I think it does work both ways, but we certainly know that clarity creates confidence. That when the clearer I get, the more I'm able to hold my position, to know what I'm about, to know what I say yes and no to show up with all of myself. So those things become easier the more I have clarity.
Yeah. So is there a certain way that we can go about getting clarity on things?
Well, there's probably many ways, but one of the things that's probably really important is to get really honest with yourself. Some of the things we talk about, is really, and I think you talk about this too, is, understanding your values, really knowing what's important to you and being honest about that. If you're in relationship, knowing what your partner's values are, understanding, where you meet with those and where there may be some differences. I think understanding what your priorities are, when I was young and I wasn't thinking about having children, that was, family wasn't nearly as important to me as once I was married and had children, then family kind of really, went much higher up on my priority list. So I think, all of those sorts of things, if you're prepared to get clear about them, will actually enable you to then make decisions more easily, to be able to access the things you want. And as I said, be able to say no to the things that maybe don't align for now anyway.
Yeah. And it is for now, isn't it? It's like in this moment, we're making this decision with the information that we have for our current situation. But I think it's interesting that you said about that clarity piece providing the confidence to make decisions, because I know for Nathan and I, we have quite a clearly articulated set of values, and when we went through that process, and we review it from time to time, but when we initially went through it, it did make decisions a lot easier, because it was like, okay, well, travel's really high on our priority list.
High on our values.
Really high on our values, which then makes it high on our priorities list. And it means that we say no to other things that would otherwise inhibit our ability to travel. So, and that comes right down to the way that we spend our money, because we've got clarity that we want to take this trip and we want to take that trip and we want to see these countries. It makes the confidence of like, should we do this? Should we not do that? Should we go to that festival? Should we do all these other things? We have a lot more confidence to say no, because we've got clarity on what we do want to do. Whereas when we're in limbo and we just say yes to everything because we're not clear about what's important, then if everything's important, then nothing's important.
Yeah. I think actually when I think about couples, I reckon money and our attitude to money is one of the kind of really important ones. If you don't have similar values there, I can't imagine, but I think it would be really tough to work things out.
So Fee, how do we stop swinging from the opposite? So if we've gone from like having, medium or low confidence to a good level of confidence, how do we stop it continuing to swing to that arrogance or cocky kind of stage of confidence?
Yeah, that's such an interesting one, isn't it? Almost that overconfidence, because we spend a lot of time thinking about having not enough or underconfidence, but what happens at the other end. And I haven't given it a huge amount of thought, but I do think there's a piece here about, your own personal growth, your own self-awareness, your own willingness to really examine yourself and where your blind spots are, where your strengths are, where your growth areas are. because we all have those, no matter how much work we've done, no matter how well we've gone in life, there is always more we can access. And I think this piece about getting overconfident, often the people who are, seen as that, this overconfident thing, actually are almost full of bravado. It's almost an act. It's almost a thing people do to compensate for insecurity or for feeling less than. So I think a lot of time in society, actually what we're seeing on the surface is not the reality underneath. But that's a hypothesis of mine.
Yeah. So, Fee, I'm curious, do we think of confidence as something that sits across all of our areas of our life equally? Or is it quite normal to have, high confidence in your career and business, but low confidence in maybe like the way that you interact with your network and family and friends, relationships, that sort of stuff? Or is it kind of you've got the skill and it applies to everything?
I think it does vary. I think the more you do this inner work and the more you're grounded in yourself and you have access to that resource, that that inner confidence, or what we call core confidence, that does play out in all areas of your life. So that's true over time. I think when I reflect back on my life and say, in my first relationship when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and, very much in love, probably, really quite confident in loving my then partner, but really quite shy in other social circles and things, or shy in my university lectures and shoots and things like that. So I think there were varying levels of confidence, but I was, in that relationship, really quite prepared to stand my ground and say what was important to me and stick up for what I thought was important to us at the time. So it definitely can be something that you work on. I think that it's the consciousness piece around this. I think the more we bring it to consciousness, the more we're able to hold our confidence no matter what's going on externally. So I think that's the journey piece here. And I was speaking to a really fascinating guy today, and I really loved the way he and his wife have so consciously discussed everything to do with, we were talking about gender equity actually, but we were talking about in the context of him taking lots of parental leave, his wife also taking parental leave. They've both done that thing that we make, that in our society we make very hard, of really sharing the parenting and really sharing the earning. And in the time that they both work for very big organisations. She's taken on a promotion in the time that they've had one of the children and is a very senior role. But they've really talked. He said they were checking in really regularly about, where am I? Where's my career? Where are we? Where is our family? The kids. And so they were doing that, at least monthly and then annually, really kind of considering, okay, if you go and do this for your career over this time, that's great, support you and that sort of thing. We're going to check in again here. We're going to decide what else we do. They really were thinking about it. And it was the first time I'd heard a couple so strategically, if you like, navigating and thinking about what was at stake. Because what I hear a lot of is, either, stay-at-home mums, that's a very common one, but then we get the stay-at-home dads, which to me is not answering the problem at all. It's actually just flipping the model, and now we've got a 1950s model where the woman's at work and the dad's at home, and that's not the answer either. So it was really, I found that very interesting to hear couples a couple navigating this in quite a different way. So I'm keen to understand more about that, and how can we support more couples to really have those conscious conversations, to think about this. And he was talking about this whole idea of identity. A lot of us get our identity a lot to do with our work and how we show up at work and our careers and that sort of thing. And when we ask someone to take a back seat from that in order to raise children, also a very, very important thing that we need as a society and a community, if we're prepared to share both of those things, how amazing is that for, I would say, not just for the parents involved, but for the organisations, for the society. Those kids are being jointly raised by two present amazing parents, both having big careers.
I think that concept builds on what you were talking about earlier about having clarity. And I guess the two of them are really clear on what roles they're playing at certain parts of their life. And then they're able to go into it really confidently, knowing exactly what their path is and knowing where they're heading.
Yeah, and you play lead and then I'll play lead in this area. Yeah, it's a really nice ebb and flow. It sounds like they've got a good model working there.
Yes, yeah, I was really impressed. And also the honesty about how much communication that took and how much self-awareness and how much of getting clear, making sure that they were on the same page, and if things change that they were talking about it, and that they were actually having the conversations about identity. How will you feel when you do that, and when you do it for 9 months, and what will that mean? And they were really examining it. And I think that is all part of this piece about living a whole life and doing it from a place of confidence and really, caring about what matters to not just one person, but the whole family,
the team.
Yeah, the whole team.
So, Fee, you mentioned that, increasing self-awareness and that, I guess, almost self-coaching or self-parenting piece is really important to building that confidence and getting that clarity. Are there any practices that you can recommend for people to do, whether or not it's like daily or weekly or monthly?
Look, personally, I think, the whole thing around mindfulness, so being prepared to really give yourself some space and time, preferably every day, whether you do walking meditations or you sit in the quiet or you do a guided meditation. I think there's something quite profound that happens to us. And I think there's, an awful lot of data that concurs with that now. I think, there's so many things that we're so distracted all the time. So how do I stay focused on what's important? I think giving ourselves time, giving the other person in our relationship the time they deserve. And, I'd really like to encourage that we examine our judgments, because I think one of the things that makes relationships hard is all the unconscious stuff, the unconscious judgments, the unconscious things that happen. One of the things that I love most about when I think about relationships, whether they're personal or work or whatever, is not needing to be right. That whole dropping, sort of almost surrendering of just not needing to be right. I think that's a huge thing in relationships. That doesn't mean that you don't stand for the things that are important to you. But you know what I mean? When, we're arguing a point, or we're trying to prove ourselves, or all of that energy that goes down that rabbit hole, it can just be so destructive and so unhelpful. So,
yeah, I like that saying, be firm on outcome but flexible on process. Like, if you're clear on where you want to go, but collaborate with your partner and how you get there, and not having to be right and fixed in the way that you want to do it.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lovely thing too about when things are tough and challenging to hang in there, and to, at times, you can use that almost as I call it my personal boot camp. So if anyone's had teenage children, or you're going to have teenage children, let me just tell you, this is a great reframe. Because they will hate you at times, and they will say vile things to you, and all sorts of stuff will go down. And a way that I have got through that is to talk about it being my personal boot camp. Another thing I think, particularly in relationships, in family relationships, but this was actually given to me by one of my mentors, is love them when they do and love them when they don't. And I think that's a really good practice for us, that, obviously not to the point of a relationship that's one-sided or destructive or abusive or anything, but on the whole, our capacity to hold space for other people and to love them even when they're being unlovable is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Love them when they do, love them when they don't. Sophie, this has been such a cool chat. We sort of talked a little bit about, loving life and dating forever. And what I would love to acknowledge is a lot of what we talked about was taking accountability and being the change for our own life, right? But for us, that be the change that also affects ourselves, but also the wider world and the change that we want to see. So to say thank you for joining us today, we've provided a student in Indonesia a week of classroom education. One of the common problems in Indonesia is that the boys get to go to school and the girls don't. So by funding some education, we help to level that out. And we know that the return on investment for education for girls is astronomical. So thank you so much for making that possible.
Oh, thank you. And I'm so keen to learn more about that, because that's obviously a cause that's very close to our heart, and I'd love to do something in that direction as well.
Yeah, it's a project. We give via Buy One, Give One, but the project itself is looked after by Friends of National Parks Foundation. So in Borneo. So I can send you some details, but yeah, we love that project.
Yeah, please do. That would be amazing.
So if anyone wants to connect with you or learn a little more about core confidence, how should they do that?
Well, we'd very much welcome anyone wanting to engage with, understand, maybe deepen their relationship with their confidence. You can find out about all things core confidence at coreconfidence.com.au. We also have a Facebook page at Core Confidence Book. And if you'd like to really get in better contact with your core confidence, the best way to do that is to join our free 10-day confidence challenge. We run them about once a month. You can go on a wait list. You just go to the website and it's there to register. And if you want to connect with me, I'm Fiona Pearman, Pearman on LinkedIn in Sydney. I don't think there's any other Fiona Pearmans.
One of a kind. Perfect. Thank you so much, Fee. This has been awesome.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Sammy and Nathan, for having me. It's been really lovely to share with you.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.